Hello, everyone. Let's wait for a couple of minutes for the new attendees, and then we shall start. Can you hear me well, by the way? Great. Great. And we have Herbert here.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the Cambridge Days event. Thank you for all of you to choosing to be with us on such a lovely weather, especially here in Istanbul. I'm guessing that we have participants from all around Turkey. I hope the weather is good there too, and you're all healthy and away from COVID thing. I'm Dorsal Hemish, the marketing manager for Cambridge University Press Turkey and the schools coordinator for Cambridge International. I would like to welcome you all to a day of exciting brand new live sessions from our international experts. Before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to briefly mention some about One Cambridge Single Strategy, Single Organization. The board in University of Cambridge decided to merge the companies under the big umbrella to a single Cambridge brand. I believe University of Cambridge Vice Chancellor Professor Stephen J. Toop summed up the situation very nicely with the following words. I'm delighted to announce this major and hugely exciting development. Cambridge Assessment and Cambridge University Press have a proud history of contributing to scholarship and education around the world. By bringing together their enormous strength and capabilities, they will be able to contribute to society more effectively and more powerfully than ever. Please feel free to visit our website, www.cambridge.org, to get more information about our single organization strategy. And now, firstly, I would like to give a brief about our event agenda. Our first speaker is Herbert Puhta, and he will be delivering a session on active learning with young learners, online and in the classroom, principles, personal reflections, and practical propositions. Dr. Herbert Puhta is a writer of course books and resource books. He has been a planner speaker at numerous international conferences and has contributed workshops and given seminars in more than 50 countries. For almost 3 decades, he has carried out research in the practical applications of findings for cognitive psychology and brain research to teaching of English as foreign language. Herbert's latest course books are Think for Teenagers, Empower for Adults, and Supermind Second Edition for Children. Our session with Herbert will be 45 minutes, including your possible questions. After that, we will have a coffee break about 10 minutes. Enjoy your session. Over to you, Herbert. Herbert?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a moment. I'm going to share my screen quickly so we can get started. Okay, here we go. First of all, thanks very much, Dr. Sal, for the introduction. I'm delighted to have been invited to be a speaker at the Cambridge Days. And I would, of course, like to especially thank you, our colleagues from all over Turkey, for taking part in this session today. As many of you know, I love coming to Turkey. I love giving workshops and talks and plenaries in Turkey. And of course, this is not possible at the moment, but I'm with you in my heart, and I hope that the current situation is soon going to be over and we can meet up in person again. Let's briefly have a look at what we're going to cover today in this session. I've been asked to talk about active learning with young learners. So I'd like to give you a brief overview. I would first of all want to unpack the term what is active learning a little bit. We are not going to go into the theory very deeply, but we will discuss the key points and come up with a definition of active learning. The second point is going to be an anecdote, basically, or reflections on an anecdote. And it's about my personal experiences with teaching a group of young learners. I've had the pleasure of working with a group of young learners for 4 years now. And of course, a lot of this for the last year has happened online. So that's something I'm going to be talking about. And then, and this is the key part of the session, practical suggestions and tips as to how we can facilitate active learning with children from kindergarten up to the age of 12, basically, especially under the current conditions, and how we can create a meaningful link also between what we do online, between the situation now and our future classroom experiences. Hopefully, they're going to happen soon, these classroom experiences. Before we look into what active learning actually is, I'd like to invite you, I'm just opening my chat box here. I'd like to invite you to briefly key in just a few words that express what you associate with active learning. Can you just type this into the chat box, please? Students' involvement, Tpr, learner autonomy, involving students actively, engagement, communication, collaboration, dances, lovely, creative thinking, dynamic interaction, student-centered learning, Tpr, songs, collaboration. Okay, that's lovely, and I think that sets the mood for what we're going to be talking about here today. I would actually like to start with a brief discussion of sort of the theory behind, oops, I'm sorry, I'm messing this up big time. The theory behind what active learning is, okay? So the first thing is that there are three kind of big sort of frames of how we could see teaching and how we could see our students learning. When I was a learner myself many moons ago, and probably when many of you were learners, teaching and learning were often seen as processes of transmission, okay? A bit like what happens when we fill up the tank of a car, okay? So in other words, that we look at the learning process of knowledge that needs to be filled into the students' empty brains. And as Andrew P. Johnson has said here, teaching is the act of transmitting knowledge from point A, the teacher's head, or the course book, or the audios, or whatever we use, the online learning environment, to point B, which is the students' heads, actually. So that would be one theory, one big sort of block of learning. The next one, and this is actually something that comes close to the core of what we are talking about when we're talking active learning. This is teaching as transaction, okay? So for most of us as teachers of language, as communication, And from what I've seen from the sort of associations you've typed into the chat box, we are not happy with just filling up our students' empty brains with knowledge. What we want to do is we want to facilitate their active and more autonomous participation in the learning process. And I think the metaphor, the idea of the bees in a beehive is actually a very useful one for that. Not only because of bees' proverbial diligence and high level of activity, but also because according to recent research, and this is quite interesting, these very sociable insects can learn new skills from one another, and they demonstrate a remarkable ability to improvise and to solve problems. There's a little bit of the idea of autonomy and autonomous learning in this metaphor, I believe. So we're mainly going to be focusing on the concept of teaching as transaction when we talk about active learning. But then, of course, there is another metaphor for teaching, and I would like to at least mention this briefly also, and that is teaching as transformation. In this process, the teacher is not only concerned with the learner's language learning and their skills development, but goes beyond those and sees the students as human beings, shall we say, on their way towards becoming caring, responsible, and clear-thinking adults. Okay, so we're looking at these three concepts of teaching, and of course, behind these three concepts of teaching, there are very clear theories of learning. Just a few more minutes about this before we look at this from a practical point of view. Okay, so transmission, you remember the metaphor of the tank of the car being filled up. This is about behaviorism and behavioristic learning theories, okay? This is usually done in a teacher-focused way. And it's, of course, something that can be very, very important also in a communicative classroom, because there are phases in our lessons when this kind of learning concept will actually be the one we're focusing on, but it can't be the only one. The second one, transaction, is about a range of cognitive learning theories from, as you can see from the middle box here, from Piaget via Vygotsky, Kieran Egan. It's basically a learning theory that is focused on constructivism and neurological learning theory. And according to these theories, learning is about a change in cognition and the creation of neurological networks. While the third, which I'm only going to mention very briefly, transformation, is basically about humanistic, transpersonal, and also holistic learning theories. These are, of course, all big chunk words, shall we say, indicative, I believe, of the enormous and the enormously important role that you as a teacher have in the development of the young people you're working with. And connected to these big ideas, I believe there is a key takeaway. And that key takeaway for you is that I believe that the choice is not whether I want to be a teacher who uses the idea of transmission, either transmission or transaction, or more the third, what was the word? I'm afraid I have forgotten it Here we go. Transformation. I think what we need to do is, or the task for us is not which of the three, but more when to use which of these learning processes actually. It is, I believe, a question of when I want to use a particular approach with my students and why. As responsible language teachers and educators of children, we need to know and need to make professional decisions as to when we use what, okay? We will, for example, use transmission as learning processes when we want our learners to remember lexis, chunks of language, grammatical forms, pronunciation. When we do a short drill, we know that these are necessary and important too. Transaction is about helping our students developing their cognition while developing their language skills, helping them to think critically, solve problems, and use their language in interaction with others. The key point here is that this kind of active engagement in the learning process leads to the students developing a sense of what is called ownership, okay? A sense of language not being something, you know, think of the term foreign language. Language not being something that remains foreign, that remains distant from them forever, but actually something they have learned to take into their hearts, something that they can use in order to express themselves. And this is, of course, a process. This is not something that happens from one lesson to the next. And transformational learning, as the third point here, is about developing our students' understanding that we are not alone in this world. It's about paving the way for the understanding that how we live our lives matters. It's about helping them to develop values and to become aware of their responsibilities as global citizens. Okay, so this is the theoretical framework. And now let's get started and look at what we can do. And I'd like to start this by briefly reflecting on my experience as a teacher of young learners. I've done this for 4 years now. It's a very personal story because the reason why I went back to the classroom 3.5 years ago was that my then 6-year-old grandson started attending school. And we live in the middle of nowhere here in the southeastern Austrian countryside. At the moment, this would look very different because we have mountains of snow right now. But when you look at this picture, you know, this really is the middle of nowhere. And actually, when you look at the middle of this picture, one of these houses here is the local primary school. Now, what I did, because I was a little bit worried that my grandson might not learn a lot of English, because although teachers here are excellent, their speciality is not teaching English as a foreign language. So I went to the ministry and asked whether they would permit me to teach this class if I did this for free. So I've been teaching them for 4.5 years, 3.5 years now, 3 lessons a week. And I must say, it's been a fantastic and wonderful experience. These are not photos of my class because you know that there is a problem with using real photos these days. So they are agency photos, but I think they express very well the kind of spirit, the kind of learning joy that I have noticed in my classroom, and also the joy that I felt personally. And then, of course, As we all know, all of a sudden, this virus stopped everything, and what used to be wonderful classroom experiences changed dramatically from one moment to the next. I am going to use some of my experiences now to discuss what we can do to facilitate active learning. And this is all based on my very, very concrete online and also classroom teaching experiences. And how we can then, once we go back to the classrooms, and I hope this is going to be the case as soon as possible. Actually, here in Austria, it's going to be the case in 2 weeks from now. Although there might be another lockdown soon. And so how we can create a meaningful link between the situation now, teaching online, and future classroom experiences. I hope that ministries of education and educational managers, school owners, and the like have learned again from this experience. Many of them have known this anyway, but I hope they have learned again how important good teaching is, and especially how important good teachers are. And when I say good teachers, I mean, of course, teachers who have a good command of the language they're teaching and who are trained in methodology, but also who have this passion to teach, because as W.B. Yeats once said, education is not the filling of a pail. Pail, if you haven't come across this term, is an old word for bucket, okay? It's not the filling of a bucket, but the lighting of a fire, okay? And so here are a few of my tips, and I'm sure that, you know, some of them will be very familiar for you. Some of them will be absolutely what you've always done. And hopefully there will also be some that are kind of like food for thought that you'd like to try out in your classroom. So a number of tips, actually 10 tips for you. The first one is make sure you offer plenty of opportunities for students to collaborate. I don't need to go into why this is important, but of course, I do want to go into the particular challenge this poses when you teach a group of young learners online, okay? So when we teach online, we have 3 basic options. The first one is asynchronous teaching. In other words, the students get a task. The teacher could even send out the task sheet to the parents via email, and the learners work on it individually, so not at the same time, okay? They're not connected with the teacher or with other learners online, okay? Asynchronous teaching. The second one is synchronous teaching. The teacher works with her learners as she does in the classroom, but online, okay? Using a platform like we are doing now. We're using Zoom. There are, of course, many different platforms. Some of them, I think, are more supportive than others. But this is what basically happens, and what I cannot do now, because you are more than 1,000 colleagues, I understand. I cannot see you all, but of course, when you have a group, a class of learners, you will see them and they will see you, and they will be connected through their audio and their video. And then we have a third option, which is asynchronous teaching, asynchronous pair work, or I haven't written this down here, or group work, where the teacher sets a task and then the learners work on it online and in pairs. And I have 2 options for this, and I'm going, because I think this is so important, I'm going to go into this and discuss this a little bit more. So this is a situation where the teacher works with the students in her classroom or online through a platform like we are using now. This is the kind of teacher-led instruction or frontal teaching, where we introduce language, where we explain tasks, where we do storytelling, to give just three examples here. The question is, of course, how do we do pair work? How do we do group work when we work online with our learners? Well, it's easy in the classroom, isn't it? In the classroom, we are working with students in a teacher-led phase, and then we say, now turn to your partner and work with your partner, and for example, do this role play or whatever. Well, the same can be done if you have the right platform. The same can be done online if we work in an asynchronous fashion. That is, if learners go into breakout rooms and they're each learning, they are learning at the same time, but they are in individual rooms here, and they work on a task that you have given them previously. So if possible, and that's my active learning tip number 2, use breakout rooms for pair work and group work. Of course, when we are in the classroom, this is very natural to many of us. When working online, it often isn't. So that would be the second tip. If we have, let's have a look at this. For example, this is a typical sort of research task for the classroom. They have learned names for subjects, and they are now supposed to discuss. This is from, if I may say that, the new edition of Superminds, second edition, year 3, Superminds 3. So they are thinking about favorite subjects. They make a prediction. You could do that still while you have all the learners in front of you, but then you put them in groups of 4. You send them into different breakout rooms with Zoom. This is, for example, easily available, possible. I'm not promoting Zoom or any other platform. It's just the one I use with my kids. That's why I know it well. So you work in groups of 4, you draw a table, you ask and write. So they ask and answer questions and they write this up. And then we put them together. You use, if you have a chat box, or Zoom has a whiteboard function where you add up all the answers from the groups on your whiteboard or your chat board. And then finally, and this can be done individually, they can do this as homework. For example, they make a bar chart, and in the next lesson, they talk about the results of their little project here, okay? Now, this is all very easy, theoretical, but of course, with young learners, especially at the beginning, this can be quite a challenge. And this is why my teaching tip number 3 is about involving our friends, the students' parents in this. I really believe that we need our parents' support to help us create learning buddies. And this is another idea I have. This is different from what I've said so far, because learning buddies, I started establishing learning buddies as soon as the online teaching phase here in Austria started, while we were having the first lockdown phase, which was basically a year ago from now, almost a year ago in March, beginning of March 2020. Apart from working with my class online, I also established learning buddies, pairs of students that I paired up, and they are still the same pairs now, almost a year later. These learning buddies, they meet up individually online or via their mobile phones, and they do certain tasks that they get. I will talk about that in a minute, that they need to do in an asynchronous fashion. So not when we are all meeting up online, but they're doing this as a special kind of homework, if you like. So I think we need parents that help us create learning buddies that show an interest but won't judge. Many of the parents of my learners have been watching the lessons. Many of them, of course, in the current phase are at home too. So they are working from home. And so they're watching their children. But of course, I had to tell them, I had to teach them, I had to train them. I did several online sessions with the parents to answer their questions, give them an opportunity to ask their questions. For example, about why do you not correct every mistake when I hear my daughter or my son is making a mistake? I notice you don't always correct. Why don't you do that? Things like that, I think it's very important. Parents need to understand what we do and why we do it. We need this good rapport with our parents. I'm totally convinced, more than ever, after having this experience myself now. Okay, so learning buddies. What can be done by learning buddies? So I tell them, today's Monday, and by Friday, I want you to meet up with your learning buddy, and I want you to do this, that, and that. And what is the this and the that and the that? Well, they can do lexical learning. They can test each other on words. They can read a text and then do the post-reading task with each other. They can do the same with listening if, and that's a big if you have the listening, if you have the audience available for them, okay? They can write text together. They can do like speaking tasks. When you've worked on a dialogue with your learners, you can get them to change this dialogue with their learning buddy. So create a new dialogue based on the dialogue they've learned. And they can, I've already said this, test each other, especially in the area of lexical learning. My teaching tip number 5, arrange students in speaking groups. And this is now speaking groups where the teacher is present. So I split up my class and I do the occasional speaking routine with them, say 15 minutes, 20 minutes, where I work with smaller groups. This could, of course, also be done in a synchronous fashion if you have a platform where you can use different breakout rooms, where you can actually jump from group to group and listen to them while they're speaking. So this is how I initially developed these speaking groups. This is a kind of typical routine of what I did in these speaking groups. A bit of small talk. You know, I mean, there's a few questions, I think, coming on the next slide. A speaking activity, usually from the course book I use, and a bit of self-reflection at the end. Let's have a look. Yes, these are questions I ask when I do small talk with them, and sometimes I use some prompts on the whiteboard that I use in Zoom, or you could even type them into the chat box. So how are you today? What time did you get up this morning? What did you have for breakfast? Forget about the next one. This is when forget about the next one. When you're working with very young learners in their early phases, but of course, the more experienced they are, the more language they have available, the more challenging your questions can become. I always do a self-assessment at the end of the session, very briefly and informally. What did you learn today? So what are the words you learned, for example? Or what did you learn from the text we read? What did you learn from that? What was easy? What was tricky? What do you need to practice more? How do you like online learning? Not necessarily discussing or asking each of these questions in each and every lesson, just ask one or two. And very recently, I have used questionnaires for assessment. Zoom also, and I'm sure also other platforms, allow for the presenter, in this case the teacher, to set up a questionnaire beforehand, and students then answer questions, either multiple choice or they type in a short answer, and then you just click a button, and then they can see the stats of their answers. They can see how many, what percentage of students was very happy with this lesson, for example, or how many were not very happy, etc., etc., etc. So that's great fun for them, and it helps them to I think, sense that they're taken seriously by the teacher. This is a key point. When working with speaking groups, interruptions have precedent. This comes from a German psychologist, Ruth Kohn, who actually said, when working with groups, interruptions have precedent. What do I mean by that? Well, a few images might explain this. Okay, so while working with a group, for example, all of a sudden we heard a baby crying in the background, and one of the kids said, "What's this?" And then one of the girls said, "It's my baby brother." And another kid said, "Can we see your baby brother?" And the mother was in the background. She had already heard that. She came and she showed the baby. And you can imagine the joy this created among my learners. Okay, we've had tales of cats waving through across the screen, and of course then what followed was a few questions about the cat. We've also had, I don't want to give the impression that all this has always worked perfectly. We've had our technical hiccups, and we've had our problems, of course, and sometimes we need to help a learner to sort out their technical problems. But on the whole, this is working really well now. The parents actually don't need to help a lot anymore after quite a few months of this online teaching having been done the way I have actually mentioned, or the ways I've mentioned. My next tip would be, in a way, I think there's a danger that we believe that when we work online with our learners, it has always be in a way that they sit in front of their screens. I also get them to stand up. This doesn't work very well here at the moment. I would need to go a bit further back to stand up and move. Okay, I do TPR activities with them. I do multisensory activities with them. Okay, so for example, one I've done recently. And this, no, not recently, when they were actually in a lower level, was, you are in your living room, okay, and I asked them to sort of lean back, okay. There's a big spider on the table. Catch the spider, and you can imagine they were going, ah! Catch the spider. Open the window, put the spider outside, the spider waves goodbye. Now, this is, of course, active learning in a way because students get activated physically. They get activated in a multisensory way. But in order for it to really qualify as what's called active learning, in the sense as discussed previously, I think it also needs to involve our students' thinking, and it needs to lead to production. So the next step here would be that I dictate these sentences. You can see the pictures are in mixed order here. I dictate these sentences again. They number the pictures. This is, again, if I may say that, from the second edition of Superminds. They then read the sentences. They draw lines to put them in the correct order. And then, this is a new thing here, we ask them to make new sentences based on the TPR sequence before. So you remember it was you are in the living room, there's a spider on the desk, there's a spider on the desk, catch the spider. Now they can change this now. For example, they could say you are in the garden, there's a little cat under a tree, touch the cat, or what have you. Whatever is culturally, of course, also permitted and meaningful. And this can be fun. They create new sentences, they listen to a friend, they act that out. They can do that, of course, in their either breakout rooms or with their learning buddy. Okay, so this was just one example. Let me go a little bit further. Assign regular homework, but it needs to be meaningful, I think. So just a quick, example. They've learned about food. They've learned the lexis for this, and now they're developing a role play together. They choose a role card. They read and plan their role plays. So student A has, you are at the sandwich shop, choose 3 fillings for your sandwich. So tomato, I don't know, lettuce and salad and mushrooms, for example. Order a sandwich and a drink. And then student B is the sandwich maker, the assistant. You make sandwiches at a sandwich shop. Ask the teacher which fillings you have and circle them. Find out what your customer wants to eat. So the teacher can, if the teacher wants, restrict this and say to a student, well, you only have mushrooms and carrots and cheese. And this is good because then if somebody asks for, I don't know, tomato, then they can say, sorry, I don't have tomatoes. Okay, there's some useful language here, and then they act out these plays. Again, can be done online, can be done if they work in breakout rooms. And this would be some meaningful homework then. And this is, again, active learning. We ask them to think of all the words they know for food and drink, write them down on pieces of paper. Then we ask them to categorize them. So how many groups can you put your words in? So this is active learning because it involves thinking. Categorizing is a critical thinking skill, very important. And then they write their words in lists. So you can see it also leads to production. It leads to writing. They have this little grid, my favorites, I like, I don't like, I really don't like, and write this up before they actually produce a short text. I'm coming to the end of this because I assume you may have a few questions also. I encourage my students to produce short videos of presentations, okay? So, whatever you're talking about, it can be, for example, you're talking about food, and you can get students to produce a short video. I'm having breakfast. And they use their mobile phones and they film themselves, having breakfast, and try to talk in English when they're doing this. And they send, I give them my mobile phone number, they send me their videos, and I can, of course, upload them and share some of their videos with the whole group if I want. This I'm not going to go into. This would be a little anecdote about my own grandson, but we don't have the time now. I use a stopwatch to challenge the kids how long they manage to talk for without using their own language. That's very, very useful. They love this. So I constantly encourage them, and I say, do you think you can break your record today? And they're very keen on this. And I use, and this is my last tip before I finish, I use a glass jar and some pebbles to reward them. So it looks like this, to reward them for expressing themselves particularly well, or for saying something that makes others laugh. I actually put 2 pebbles in the glass jar. When a learner says something to another learner, in English, of course, without me having prompted it. So this is a way of getting them to interact more among themselves in a spontaneous way. And again, of course, this leads to this sense of ownership. So here's my glass jar. What have I learned from this experience? Well, first of all, to my surprise, online learning can facilitate active learning and can also work well, really well, with young learners. Some of my students have made a giant leap forward, both as far as learner independence is concerned and as far as their language development goes. That, again, was a surprising insight for me. I personally have learned a lot from this experience in terms of methodology of teaching online, in terms of what I can actually continue with once back in the classroom. And these are my propositions that have come out from that. First of all, make sure you use synchronous and asynchronous online learning arrangements. Really important, I believe. Also because of student talking time. My proposition number 2, active learning requires the facilitation of autonomous learning strategies. And we need to make sure that we invest the time that is needed to support our students in developing those strategies. And the third one is that once back in the classroom, I will continue to use the buddy learning system. So I will continue to assign homework to my learners that they need to do with a learning buddy. Most of my students are actually doing that using their mobile phones. I will continue asking students to record short presentations, kind of like show and tell. I have mentioned that. And I will also continue with the occasional buddy and group speaking phase online outside of the normal timetable. And if there's one thing I have learned, then it's, this is the last point, how important it is to have closer contact with the parents. Okay, thank you so much. Back to Dograsal and to your questions.
Yeah. But can you see the questions on the Q&A part or Q&A box, or shall I read it aloud for you?
Okay. The first one.
From Sinem Savuncu.
Sengic, I don't know how to pronounce it, is asking, how can I teach English as a foreign language? Well, what I have been talking about is English as a foreign language. I understand that for some learners who have a low self-esteem, this is something that takes a little bit of time. If you have a low-level group of learners, I think you have to be patient. It's a step-by-step approach. Do use, as I have shown, especially when they're very young, do use multisensory activities also, and develop their reception first. Do quite a bit of storytelling, so their understanding will be developed first, and then gradually lead them towards production. But the production should always also be that you give them the language they need in order to say something that they want to say. Gita, do you think education will be semi or fully online in the future? If so, should we be concentrated on more online teaching skills? Excellent question. Thank you, Gita. I think it will remain online under certain conditions. I think certain environments will sort of almost require more online teaching when parents in huge cities where traffic is a real problem cannot actually take their children to schools, then I think some of the teaching may happen more online. That's the future I see, but hopefully quite a decent proportion of the teaching will happen in classrooms. I still believe that the classroom is the place for teaching. Really, online can be an add-on. That's how I see it. Do you think education will be semi or fully online? That's the same question. Elgin, as native teachers, students don't understand very good what to do or use breakout rooms. Yeah, I take your point here. Depends on the level of your students. You may have to use the student's mother tongue initially a little bit, especially in order to help them understand how things work and how you want them to work. And then gradually you reduce the amount of English you use. I can only say it's amazing how much children can actually understand if you take this approach. One technique I would like to suggest is the so-called sandwiching technique, where you say an instruction in English, then you say the same instruction in Turkish, and then you say it in English again. And you do that 3 or 4 times, and then you just leave out the Turkish and they will understand you, okay? Let's not spoon feed them. They usually understand more than what we expect, but especially in early phases, I agree, we need to support them. I've been working with 3-year-olds. No, breakout rooms won't work with 3-year-olds unless you have the children's parents there. And of course, with 3-year-olds, it would be good to have the mother or the grandmother or the father or the aunt or what have you, or the nanny, because 3-year-olds on their own in front of a computer would be a little bit sad anyway, wouldn't it? So again, parents are extremely important. Do you have ideas how to solve this working in pairs without parents, breakout rooms? I'm working with first graders and they need to do it themselves. Yeah, the only way I know, but again, you need parents' consent, is mobile phones, okay? And initially, parents need to help, of course. I don't see any other way. You said we need parents' help, but what if they don't show interest in their kids' learning progress through online learning? What to do then? Well, if we need to work with kids online, we need parents' consent so that their child is allowed to work online. That's the minimal sort of requirement. If maybe parents are not there all the time and they don't support you actively, then maybe, I don't know if that's possible for you, if one child has a problem technically, so to speak, but they have a phone in their house, maybe you can phone them up and help them before the session starts. That's how I do it sometimes. How can we help our learners to find out a pair as a teacher if their parents are not able to find? Well, as I think I've answered this. What if one buddy works more than the others, or the other doesn't care about the one learning process? How could we lead the buddies in this situation? Good question. If you have breakout rooms, you can listen in. As you do, you walk around the classroom, you work with your learners' pairs. You work with one pair and then you move on to the next. So you can do that with breakout rooms. I totally know what you mean here. This is a question of classroom management, as it is when we work with kids in a classroom. Some are more active, others are less active, and we need to educate them. I agree. Do you think the teacher's job is divine? It's a good question. I really think being a teacher is a wonderful responsibility, and it's something that is simply great. It's wonderful. I don't know, Dr. Rusal, we have many more questions here, and we don't have the time to answer them.
Yes, actually, we in conscious of time, we can finish here. Thank you very much, Herbert, for being with us today and sharing your expertise with our audience. I hope you all enjoyed our first session. Now we have approximately 4 minutes for the next session, so we can have a break here and come back with the band's session later on. Thank you. Enjoy the break, although it's very short. Thank you.
Ben, hi. Hello, Ben?
Hello there. Okay.
Can you hear us well?
Yeah, now I can.
Great,
I
great.
didn't hear anything before.
We have only a couple of minutes on the
Sure.
2 minutes for the break, then we shall start.
Okay. Everything okay? I need to share the screen. Hang on.
I can stop sharing and you can go.
Do you want me to share the screen now? Yeah?
You can.
Yeah. Is that okay? Hang on, hang on.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Great. It's always kind of, the beginning is always nerve-wracking. I guess you have done a lot of these. Do you want me to mute? Or they can hear us, or?
They can hear, everybody
okay.
can hear.
Now I need to have a look at the Q&A. Wow.
A lot of questions there. I will refresh it right now.
Okay.
For your questions. Wow, a lot of questions.
A lot of questions.
Yep.
I've got the questions kind of covering my screen. I don't know how to, hang on a second. Dorosan, do you know how to make the questions. I'm trying to drag it over because it's covering my PowerPoint screen, the question thing.
You can just simply close it.
Yeah, the thing is, I've covered. Hang on a second. Oh, okay. Yeah, it was just our photos were covering it. Yeah, okay. I'll close it then now.
Okay, great. I guess time is up now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we are all back again. Our second speaker is Ben Goldstein. Ben will be delivering a session on encouraging learner autonomy. Before we start our session with Ben, I would like to give a brief information about him. Ben is a material writer, teacher trainer, and conference speaker. He teaches on the online MATSO program of the New School in New York for Cambridge University Press. He has published 2 methodology handbooks for teachers, language learning with digital video, and working with images. For students, he co-authored the secondary level series Eyes Open, and is one of the main author of the new adult series Evolve. His areas of interest include visual literacy, global competence, and question of identity and language learner. And today he is with us. Our second session with Ben will be around 4 to 5 minutes. After that, we will have another coffee break. I hope this time 10 minutes. Enjoy your second session. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Doro-san. Thank you, everyone, for attending the webinars today, this Friday afternoon. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Barcelona. Spring is in the air. I hope where you are too. February is a strange month, but I hope it's you're looking forward to the weekend as well. Anyway, I'm going to be talking, as Doro-san said, about learner autonomy, and in particular reference to 3 of the Cambridge Life competencies. I don't know if you know about these competencies. You've heard other people, other speakers mention them, but I'll be referring in terms of language and autonomy in reference to these 3 competencies, which we'll look at in a moment. But first of all, why is learner autonomy important? And I think actually, particularly at the moment with remote learning environments, I don't know how many of you are teaching, perhaps you could put in the chat if you're teaching remotely now or have been teaching remotely, or a mixture of both. I don't know what the situation is in Turkey. I know there are some also participants from other countries. I saw somebody from Albania there. Some people only remotely, some people, I'm having a look now, as there's always a bit of a delay with the chat. But one of the things that's very true is that teacher-led methodology does not work in remote learning environments. I think that's true to say. And in fact, the more autonomous the learners are when they're learning remotely, the better. And it seems that remote learning with and teaching with Zoom, for example, works when you give more responsibility to the learners. I'm sure most people would agree with that. So I'm not going to be referring at all today to teaching using these techniques remotely, not in a specific way, but all of them can be, I think, applied to remote learning environments. But these are just basic tips on learning autonomy, learner autonomy in general. It does seem to me that with blended or remote learning environments, this is particularly relevant. Now, one of the reasons it's relevant, of course, is that the life skills, we need to focus on the life skills that learners require to be effective and autonomous learners. That's what we're going to be looking at, and practical ideas for developing these skills and competence. So the skills and then the ideas which emerge from these, looking at these skills. Learner autonomy, there's lots of different, there are lots of different definitions of it. I'm sure sometimes it's called learning to learn as well, learner autonomy and learning to learn. But it's the idea that students take more responsibility for what they learn and how they learn it. So it's not just taking responsibility for the subject they're learning, but also the strategies that they employ to learn something successfully. It's how you learn as well as what you learn. And this is very important because many people think that learner autonomy is simply giving the students more opportunity to take part collaboratively with others in class. And no, it's not just that, but it's also the development of processes of learning. So getting more involved in the learning process in general is the key thing. So autonomous learners, maybe it's easier to refer to autonomous learners than learner autonomy. What do autonomous learners do? Well, they play an active role in their learning, they make decisions about their learning, and they reflect and evaluate their learning. So that is the key three elements here. They generally, doing these three things, they become more involved in the learning process. This is the key message here. Now, we all know, some of you will be familiar with the Cambridge Life Competencies, but it's clear that in today's world, with 21st century global learners, there are lots and lots of different things we need to be exposing our learners to, and not just language. We previously were, that should be learning to learn. Sorry, not earning to learn. That's a Freudian slip. Sorry about that. But clearly, we're not just teaching English now. There's a lot to take on board for teachers today, and it can get a bit intimidating, I think. And some of you may feel that we're asking you to do too much. But in actual fact, I think during the pandemic, we've learned, in actual fact, that our role is not simply one of just teaching English language, but we are also reaching out to our learners on a social and emotional level. And I think this is connected. Some of the life skills that we're talking about, collaboration, critical thinking, these are thinking and learning skills, but we also need to think of communication and collaboration as a social and emotional skill. And I think that's very, very important as well to consider. So let's have a look then. Where do we begin with all of this? So I think it's too much to talk about, all of those different issues is too much to talk about in one webinar. So we're going to break it down today. When we talk about learning autonomy, it seemed to me that to talk about learner autonomy, we need to consider three of these different skills. Two of them are thinking and learning skills, and one is a social and emotional skill. So I've indicated the ones I'm going to be referring to today. So that is critical thinking, learning to learn, and collaboration. So all the activities we see today are going to be focusing on these particular three skills. Now, that's not to say the others are not important, but I think learner autonomy is really related specifically to these three. And of course, they overlap. They're not mutually exclusive. These skills overlap. And we'll see various different activities in which I have divided the activities into critical thinking, learning to learn, and collaboration. But in actual fact, you'll see that many of the activities actually involve multiple skills at the same time. The basic objective of this is that learners think for themselves and are better equipped to make decisions. So let's have a look then at the three skills together. Hang on a second. Here you'll see that they overlap, I think, in the middle there with learner autonomy. They're all kind of related. And we do need to think slightly differently about the word collaboration. Collaboration isn't just the idea of working together. It is the idea of understanding each other's role and respecting each other's role. It isn't just a case of let's do it together. I think it's very important that students begin to realize when they're doing a project work, for example, who takes responsibility for which element, and respecting differences of opinion and different forms of decision making. So let's begin with learning to learn. We're going to look at the three big skill areas, but let's begin with learning to learn, which is the one which is probably closest in your mind to learner autonomy. And of course, when we're giving students responsibility for their own learning, teachers become more of a facilitator rather than an instructor. And so for them to become more involved, you have to take more of a back seat and facilitate. And again, I think this is very, very, very what teachers have had to do in remote learning environments. I'm sure that some of you have realized that you have to take more of a back seat role in those kinds of environments. Some of the things that we're going to be looking at though today, another thing to bear in mind is that these strategies, these techniques for making our students more autonomous need to be developed gradually. It's not something that you can change overnight. And just with repetition and giving students more choice about which different techniques or strategies they want to adopt, they will become eventually automatic. But it's very important that students, you don't see this as changing people's mindset overnight. This is something which takes place gradually. So for example, in terms of vocabulary, learning different kinds of vocabulary, students need to be exposed to lots of different ways of learning vocabulary, mind maps or recording themselves in order for them to decide which is best for them. So let's have a look then at looking at learning to learn. Effective learners, when they're learning to learn, do all the work, or at least they do most of the work. And I'm going to show you three very, very easy, quick tips here for dealing with emergent language. In other words, that's the language that comes up in class, which is very relevant because it's not the language that you have planned to teach students. It's language which kind of evolves, that emerges naturally from the to and fro of the class activity. And that's what makes this language important, because if it has emerged, it's because someone has expressed a necessity to use that language. So one way to, there are three ways I'm going to explain to you now, but one of the nice ways is called 3 before me. So in other words, the typical thing the teacher does if they don't know a word, or if a language, a lexical item, a word comes up in class and the student doesn't know the meaning of that word, the typical thing is the student asks the teacher for the meaning. What does this word mean? And a nice thing to do to contrast that is what's called 3 before me. And what that means is 3 students before me, the teacher. So instead of saying, teacher, what does this mean? An important item that I want to know the meaning of, ask 3 students. And now in a remote language environment, for example, in a breakout room, that would be very possible with 4 students, for example. So they could all say, do you know the meaning of this word? Do you know the meaning? Do you know the meaning? And if one of them does, it's obviously better, because that's peer learning, encouraging peer learning. So that's 3 before me. It's like a little rule to get students to think that they can learn from their peers and not just from you, the teacher. Your new word. When we talk about learner autonomy and getting learners to take responsibility for their own learning, we need to give them choice. We need to give them an ability to decide which of this language, for example, they want to focus on. So when you are giving new language, new vocabulary on the board, you can say, okay, so of these items, which is going to be your new word today? And this encourages them to create what we call a personal lexicon. In other words, each student is different, will have different needs and different interests. And certain items will be more interesting, stimulating for one person than for another. Getting students to think of what's my new word today and why is it important to me is, I think, an important strategy for learners to adopt. I'll just give you an anecdote. I remember I was once in Brazil with Cambridge doing a tour, and we were looking at food in the course book. And I was in the Amazon, in a city called Manaus, which is in the middle of the Amazon jungle. And we were looking at fruits and vegetables in the course book. And one of the students said to me, I don't know why we're learning, apple and pear, because we don't have apples and pears here. We have mangoes and avocado and things like this. And it struck me then that although, of course, we need to show students the basic vocabulary, you know, for a particular student in a particular context, one word is going to be much more important. They eat mangoes every day, whereas I never eat mango. It's very expensive to buy. Yeah. And so I think that's a nice anecdote to show that students need to develop not just the vocabulary in the books, but also their own personal lexicon of vocabulary, which is important to them. Another way, of course, of recording and recycling emergent language or target language is vocabulary cards. And I'm sure with teenage students, I'm going to be focusing mainly on teens in this session, but I'm sure you've seen this, and maybe some of you have done this. You could put perhaps in maybe a little note in the chat if you've used vocabulary cards. So this is just a technique. This is with Post-its. Students generate this. So they have, in terms of fruit and vegetables, it's a fruit, it is big, outside is green, and inside is red. For an A1, A2 student, and that would be a watermelon, of course. I know you have this in a lot for breakfast in Turkey. I seem to remember having watermelon. An animal that you can see in the sea, it has electricity in its legs, and there you've got watermelon and a jellyfish. So these are, again, very, very simple ideas for encouraging learner autonomy, getting students to make their own vocabulary cards and not just relying on the flashcards that you may have. And of course, then they can group these to make a story. They can be used for vocabulary games that I'm sure you're familiar with, games like Taboo or miming games and so on. And they can be used to develop other skills. So they can keep a collection of these cards and then they can categorize them, they can group them, compare and make connections between them and so on. Somebody said, it's a symbol of my city. What, a jellyfish is the symbol of your city, or the watermelon? I wonder. I'm just looking at the chat. A lot of coming in interesting comments. The watermelon, okay. And what city is that? That would be interesting to know. Let me see. Aydin is from where they are from. There's a little delay. Diyarbakir. Okay, that's very interesting. There you go. So get the students to make vocabulary cards is a nice technique. Here's another one, a person who does magic, the opposite of tame, so for adjectives as well as nouns. So you've got magician and wild. And notice that you can use the different phonemic symbols or different stress on these vocabulary cards as well. Okay, so learning to learn, this is a very simple ideas, but we said that learning, effective learners who are learning to learn do all the work, and they also use a variety of learning to learn techniques. And here's a nice activity from Own It, where the students, they have a look at an activity and then they develop what could be good habits as good habits for pair work. And this is something which you don't often see in course books, but getting students to actually think, how do you learn effectively in pairs? How do you learn effectively with your partner? And I like very much here the idea, I don't know if you can read that properly, it's a little bit blurred, I'm sorry, but I like the idea there, the students are forced to, they have a look at this activity, let's work well together, always listen to your partner, answer your partner's questions, don't speak at the same time as your partner. These are nice little tips to encourage students to respect their partner, to make the most of their partner, and to do an activity like this. So I think this is, again, encourages peer learning, getting students to think of their partner in terms of someone else they can learn from and someone else they should respect as well. So there's an overlap with collaboration there. So we could then say, that's a nice learning to learn technique, I think, developing good habits for pair work or group work. So effective learners do all the work, use a variety of techniques, and identify goals and reflect. So remember what we said at the beginning, that learner autonomy is not just about giving students responsibility for what they're learning, but for how they're learning. And I think this is very important. Here, we're talking about the KWL, the, I don't know what I know. You may have done these, looked at these charts. They're used in all kinds of different walks of life, not just in education, but a very interesting way of approaching a different topic is to know, to divide your knowledge of a subject into what you know, what you want to know, and then what you have learned about a topic. It's a KWL chart. Is that familiar to any of you? You may have used that, and that's very, very, very good for students to fill in at the start of a new unit, for example, at the start of a new topic. And in terms of self-assessment, of course, again, students need to be aware of what they have learned. And these famous can-do statements are very important for students to not just to assess what they have learned, but also strategies for learning. So not just what have I learned, but how successful is my learning and what is my next step? So personalized action points, for example. This is an interesting one. This is a little questionnaire you can give students. This is before students making a short film. Students were, that's what it says, to write the scenes there. Students were making a short film, and before they did that, they filled in this questionnaire to focus on the different stages within that project and how successful they've been at these particular criteria. So again, I think this is very important for getting students to think before the project, to reflect on their learning and to reflect on their strategies for learning. So you can see the different skills and what they need to do. And then they can look at this afterwards and see if they've done that adequately or not. And project work is, I could give you a whole talk about project work. Project work has become extremely important in remote teaching and learning environments, because project work, clearly, a lot of it can go on outside the classroom. And of course, so much learning during the pandemic, so much learning has happened outside the classroom. And so project work is extremely suitable, especially for teens, and especially at the moment. And it really encourages learner autonomy. Here's sorry, that's the way they fill in this form with the evaluation here. So here's some advantages of project work. I haven't got time to go into different projects. I'm sure some of you, perhaps you could write in the chat if you've done any interesting projects with your students recently. But I think they are incredible personal advantages for project work. As I said, it develops autonomy and sense of responsibility, and involves students in the learning process. There's so many different things, personal reasons to do project work with teenagers. Creativity, motivation, curiosity, but also there are great academic advantages to doing project work. Okay, some people have started to write entrepreneurial projects, STEAM projects. And I think this ability, what's lovely about project work is getting learners learning from each other, motivating them as a group. And as I said here, it's very suitable for the flipped classroom or the remote classroom environment. Next time, if Turkey invite me, then I'd love to give you a talk on project work in general. I think it's become very important, as I said, at the moment. But that will have to be another day. But certainly project work is a great way to encourage more learner autonomy. Okay, so that was looking at learning to learn. Now let's look at critical thinking. The more students think for themselves, the more autonomous they will be. That's a truism, I think. So what do critical thinkers have to be? Effective learners are always thinking, okay? So you're always thinking. And thinking is often been called the fifth skill, yeah? That we focus so much on the 4 skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And often we forget about the 5th skill. And so again, students are always thinking, and this, we need to encourage this in the types of questions that we ask our students. This will influence their interaction and the quality of their learning. So let's just show you, let me just show you a basic, an example of the kinds of questions we can ask students to make them more creative and critical thinkers. So I would look at this and think of not just seeing, questions which focus on seeing, but questions that focus on thinking and wondering. So when we look at an image, we don't just describe the image, which is a kind of lower order thinking skill, but we encourage students to interpret the image or to reflect on the image, which would be a higher order thinking skill. So for example, this is another example from Own It. And here, the typical question that you'd have of these images of these teenagers or young people in strange positions, sitting and standing in unusual positions. The typical question would be, what can you see and what are they doing? Well, that's fair enough, but you get a very limited response, wouldn't you? It would be rather predictable in terms of the language production. So what other questions could we ask? Maybe you'd like to put in the chat. What other question could you ask the students, showing them the same image? I'll just wait and have some water while you're... What do you feel when you see the image? Okay, how many people? Okay, but how many people would be a description? Would you like to be there? I like that. Yeah. That's nice. What can't you see? God, I have to read very, very fast. What does it make you feel? Yeah, so questions that encourage an effective response or encourage a reflective response as well. Here are some ideas that I had. So in what ways are you similar and different to them? So personalization. Like one of the people said in the chat, look outside the picture. What can they see? So you try and imagine what they can see. Choose 2 of the people. What are they saying to each other? So this all encourages a lot of imagination and also encourages longer turns. So for example, if I just say to you, describe this photograph, what can you see? You could just get a very, very, very short response. But if you think of a more creative, more imaginative question, this creates a longer responses. Students will talk for longer, explaining, because they have to explain the question that they've asked or answered. So some of your ideas are lovely, yeah. And all of any image which kind of provokes curiosity, you can ask questions like this, rather than the simple descriptive questions, more interpretive questions. And this will encourage, as I said, more language, generate more language, and an element of personalization. Students will be more engaged and take more active role in the task. Okay, and then the other idea which is important is the idea of sense of achievement. So I think it's very important when we're giving students a specific task to give them a specific number. So in other words, let's just say you're doing a discussion activity and you're talking about extreme sports. A way to encourage students to speak for longer, for generate more language, is to give them a particular number of things you want them to talk about. So why do people do extreme sports? Think of 3 or more reasons why people do extreme sports. And that's a simple idea, but it's very often we forget. These simple ideas are often the ones we forget the most. And I say 3 or more because some students, some of the faster students may think that 3 is too few. So this encourages more meaningful interaction. Then the time limit, so you can use something like a classroom timer. I don't know if you've ever used this, classroomtimer.com, which you can get and download online, and it creates a kind of like an egg timer here, and it gives students a time limit, 1 minute. I guess it's very nice for teens. This really encourages them so it gives them a sense of achievement if they have a time limit. And of course, it raises the challenge as well to the task. If you have a time limit, it makes it more difficult, more challenging. So in terms of critical thinking, developing critical thinking, effective learners, we've said always thinking, get students thinking even within an image with a topic for discussion. And also I think an element that's important is training their brains. So training students' brains to look at images and discuss topics in different ways, which perhaps they're not used to doing. So for example, I'm going to show you an image now, an unusual image. I hope can you see that? I hope you can see that. It's a little bit blurry on the right-hand side. But this image I've chosen because it's curious, okay? So I want you to have a look at that image. I'm going to set you and I just want you to think about what is in the picture. Now, if I was doing this with students, I would just do it as a memory test. I wouldn't get them to write it down, but I'm getting you to write it down because you can participate and it's fun to write it down. But if I was doing this with my students, I'd give them 20 seconds to look at the photo and tell me what's in the photo. And then I'll take the photo away and we'll do a memory test. And this is just to encourage you to write down, right? Strawberries and garlic and fruits and vegetables have fields of fruit and vegetables, yeah. Okay, and the idea of this task is not to extend students' vocabulary of fruit and vegetables. That's not the idea. The idea is to improve their memory skills and their power of observation. And it's fun and motivating. I've shown it to you for a long time. If I take it away now, if I leave you now for like a minute to think, you probably will have forgotten some of those images. Then if I get you in a breakout, if I put you with other students into a breakout room, for example, or in a face-to-face classroom, then together they will recompose the image, okay? I saw fields of cucumbers and broccoli trees, and together they will collaborate to describe that image effectively. So it's not really the vocabulary that's important, it's the process of observing and the improving and working together to improve memory skills. That's an activity you can do. If you're going to do that, though, obviously choose an image which is kind of curious like this, which is interesting and engaging, and that will get students again to more engaged in the task. Another way to engage learners is to surprise them. Here, you could just put an instruction upside down. I don't know if you've ever done that. Obviously not something you want to do every class, but it can be a way to get students, to shake the students. So teenagers like the unexpected, and it could be something that could work from time to time. In terms of critical thinking as well, it's important to give students choice and lots of different kinds of puzzles. Teenagers love puzzles, anagrams, word snakes, code. Here are three different kinds. On the left-hand side, you have your typical anagram. All of these come from Own as well. On the second one, you have is the word snake, and then you have the codes. But rather than getting the students to do them all, tell a student or tell a pair of students, okay, which one would you like to do? Choose one of them. And that gives them, again, that gives them a sense of taking responsibility for their own learning. And they may well gain an insight into their learning style as well by doing that, by choosing one of them. They may realize, oh, well, I really like the codes because I like all the different icons, and I have that kind of mind that I find that more fun or more challenging. So again, for homework activities, this is very good, getting the students to make a choice of which one of these games they would like to do, and why would they like to do them. Talking of games, we said then critical thinkers, effective learners of critical thinking are always thinking. They're training their brains and thinking how good, effective techniques for language learning, but also they're solving problems. And I'm going to give you an activity to do now to help me solve a problem. I hope you haven't seen this before because it's very funny. So we're going to do an activity where we're going to solve a puzzle, we're going to solve a problem. And the important thing here is not the right answer. And this is so true of critical thinking activities in general. The important thing is not getting the right answer. It's the process of getting to an answer. That's the key thing about critical thinking activities. So let's have a look. Do you know about crows? Okay, this bird. Somebody's going to say it's the symbol of their city. Or maybe not. But so do you know about crows? Crows are very intelligent birds. They are extremely good at solving problems. They live a long time. Yeah, that's right. They're sociable. They're very, very clever. So I want you to work together. What we're going to do is to work together to solve a problem. You have a bird, a crow, a walnut, a nut, okay? And the problem is that a bird does not have a nut cracker, okay? So how is the bird going to break the nut without the nut cracker? The bird can't break it. It's too hard for the beak. So I want you to think, pair, and share. Yeah, I would imagine that they use their beak, but in actual fact, the nut is too tough. It's too strong if they use the beak. So how can they do that? Just think about it. And I like this activity. If you were doing it with your students, you could do think individually, okay? Then pair with another student, and then share your ideas with the class. I don't know if you've heard that before, but think, pair, and share is a nice way to get students solving problems. Okay, so I'm going to give you a clue as to what the solution. And look, let's have a look at some people place it. Okay, some people are dropping from a balcony. Some people are getting quite close to the answer. Okay, I think some of you maybe have seen, maybe some of you have seen it, but there's some very nice ideas here. Falling from a high distance, they put it on the road. Okay. Okay, some of you have got, yeah, either from a very high distance or throwing it to the road. So it says think of 3 or more ways. So notice again, 3 or more ways. So rather than the students, okay, I finished, get them to think, okay, that's a really good idea of throwing it from a high building. Okay, can you think of another one? But of course, remember that the bird has to do this. So, okay, let's have a look then at a clue. This is to think of 3 ways, share your ideas with a partner and choose the best one. So again, in terms of the students negotiate to find what is the best. The correct answer is not important. What's important is what they think is the best, why they think it's the best answer. That's the important thing here to communicate to students when you're doing critical thinking activities. So here is a clue then to the task, and it involves a traffic light. Now, did anybody's idea involve a traffic light? Okay. Somebody, Serap says yes. So good. So they wait for cars to run over it. Exactly. So let's have a look at the video. I'm going to show you the video where you can see how the crows do this in Japan.
Crows have become highly skilled at making a living in these new urban environments. In this Japanese city, they have devised a way of eating a food that normally they can't manage. Dropping a nut from a great height onto a hard road does sometimes crack it, but some nuts are particularly tough. So the crows have devised a better way. Drop it among the traffic. The problem now is collecting the bits without getting run over.
It's kind of dangerous.
So some birds have refined their technique. They station themselves beside pedestrian crossings. Wait for the lights to stop the traffic. Then collect your cracked nut in safety.
Got to be careful though. Okay, that's from the BBC. Somebody rightly said David Attenborough, the wonderful presenter of nature programs, who's the narrator there. So that would be, again, it's from the Own It course book, and that's where you can see the definition. And again, as I said, it's very important. I will repeat this again. It's because teenagers are very competitive. The important thing to say to them is it's not necessarily the group that comes up with the right answer. It is the process of getting to the answer, the process of coming up with ideas and deciding on the best ideas. That's the important thing for encouraging critical thinking and learner autonomy. Okay, we need to press on the third one. Remember, we had learning to learn, critical thinking, and now collaboration. I've moved through these. I may not have time to show everything, but again, collaboration, as I said, is not just a question of sharing, working together, but also of understanding each other's role and respecting each other's role. And it's not just a question of collaborating in terms of language skills, what you know, but in terms of language, but also in terms of general knowledge. And that's very, very important, that students think of their peers, not in terms of just their language proficiency, but in terms of the general knowledge they may have about the world. For example, in this activity that we saw, we just said collaboration, effective learners pool ideas and work together. And this activity with the crow and the nut, we saw with the think, pair, and share is a very good example of collaboration. And a nice idea is what's called a carousel of ideas. I don't know if you've seen this one, where students, before they look at a topic, in this case, it's Australia, a student, you have a student has a big piece of paper and you have a different triangle. You write on one aspect, write their ideas on only their triangle. So each student writes on one of the triangles and then you turn the paper around. So student 1 talks about animals, student 2 talks about places in Australia, student 3 talks about food. And then you pass the paper around and you can give them a time limit if you want as well. and then the student generates ideas about this. And then you move it around like a carousel. That's why it's called a carousel of ideas. And the students have to add more of their ideas without repeating the ideas that the other students have done. And that generates lots of general knowledge for example, before you look at a text about Australia, for example. So this is a very nice idea for students to collaborate, not just in terms of language proficiency, but in terms of general knowledge. So you get at the end of the carousel, you get all these different ideas, different people, different students collaborating to think of things to do with Australia. And then they can see in the reading text how many of those ideas were actually in this text about Australia. So that's pooling ideas together and working together. Effective learners learn from each other. Here's another idea similar to the previous one. And it's what we call an ideas continuum. So again, it's students thinking, oh, so I know a lot about, let's say, Australia, surfing and barbecues, Melbourne, the city of Melbourne, marsupials, for example, that certain kind of animals like platypus or something has a specific marsupial who lives in Australia. And then the students mingle and they try to find someone who can teach them. So each student does this individually. And then the students trying to find someone who can teach them something about one of these topics related to Australia. And again, this encourages students to think of their peers, not just in terms of their language proficiency, but in terms of their knowledge. So peer teaching as well, in terms of language, you can set up many activities where students have to recycle vocabulary with definitions, and they can do a mingle activity where the students they have to find, the student has a definition, like find someone who, but with definitions. So the students are learning from their peers. And of course, sorry, I'm going so fast, but I want to finish. Peer feedback as well, listening to each other and giving feedback. So when students don't just do the self-assessment for themselves, they do assessment for their learner. So, a checklist, not just me, but my partner. Did my partner? This can be difficult sometimes with students teenagers who can be a bit competitive, but I think it's very important to encourage students' peer feedback, that they feel safe enough in their learning environment to not feel judged, and that the students are giving them useful feedback, and that doesn't just come from the teacher. So giving peer feedback and in terms of writing as well is an easy way to do it, I think, with writing rather than with other tasks. Okay, so I've realized we're up to time, so I'm just going to repeat just a little resume of what we've done. We've been looking at learner autonomy, and we've looked at it, addressed it from those 3 Cambridge Life competencies. Remember, learning to learn, critical thinking, and collaboration. We've seen that they all kind of overlap in the general topic of learner autonomy. And we said this is very important, obviously, in today's world, and particularly important at the moment, I think, during the pandemic, that we encourage students to take on this responsibility, because, as I said, in remote contexts, this is something which is happened anyway without really us planning it, but it's something we can definitely cultivate. And finally, just to give you a task which is related to the tasks I've been encouraging you to do with your students, can you remember some of the activities I gave you? Which 3 ideas would you most like to use with your learners? So you see, I'm giving you the choice as well, just as I said that you should give choice to your students. So here are some of those activities. A couple of them were a bit fast at the end, but that will jog your memory to reflect on some of the tasks we've done and which ones you would like to do with your learners. It will depend on you. It will depend on your context. It will depend on the profile of your learners. but as with all webinars and talks, you take what you can. And I think it's a nice activity here. This is the sort of activity you would give to your students, give you the choice to say which ideas you would most like and why would be most useful for you. Okay, thank you very much. We've reached the end. Now we've got the questions. I hope there are some questions. Dorosal, is he? I don't know. I can't.
Well,
oh, there you go. I was wondering if I can access the questions myself. Thank you very much anyway, everybody, for attending. And
if you want, I can read some of the questions.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot.
Okay. From Katrina Horeca, what is the effect of online studying on kids' motoric and social skills in long run, in your opinion?
Could you say that again, Dorisa?
What is the effect of online studying on kids' motoric and social skills in long run, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, I think that it all depends on the context. I mean, some of the people I know who've been teaching remotely with teenagers have found it very, very challenging and very difficult to get students motivated. Students don't, have their camera on and things like that. And this is very counterproductive in a language classroom if you think about it. But if things work, if the teacher realizes that they have to become more of a facilitator, give more responsibility for learners, I think this can actually help the group socially. That was one of the criteria. No? I mean, it all depends. I've heard so many different, so much feedback. I teach online, I teach remotely, but I teach adults, I teach in a master's program. It's not comparable. I think remote teaching with teens, I think it can actually help students to gel, to learn from each other. If everything goes well, everything goes right, I think it can actually improve. I think that students who didn't used to participate in a face-to-face classroom can participate more. Students can learn to respect each other more, can learn from each other more. I just think it's a very big question, and I think it depends so much on the context. But I have seen very positive reports from other teachers who've said that their group has coalesced, has actually, the cohesion of the group has improved. So from that social point of view, so from social and emotional learning point of view, I think there are very positive things, and it would be very interesting to go back to I don't know if any of the teachers here have worked remotely, then gone back to the face-to-face classroom, and if they've noticed any differences in the way the students relate to each other, that would be very interesting to analyze. But I think it could be very beneficial. That is my answer.
Yes, I'm just trying to scroll down to the next question. I have some tech problems.
No problem. I could try and have a look. It'd be interesting to see anyone in the chat if they have any comments about that, whether the remote environment has actually helped make the group more closer and less fragmented. I've heard that is the case, but I've heard other stories as well where it has not worked.
Well, I can move to the next question from Alvin Husson. Students acting like we have taught a unit about travel, etc. They like to do it as they are really traveling, like checking or going to somewhere else, etc. So would it be useful to prepare speaking lessons with real materials, but not many schools can support the materials? What if the publisher can afford these materials to use in teaching speaking tasks especially?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good observation. Students, especially teens, they want to be actively involved and they want to feel that it's closely related to the real world. And as the teacher said, it's quite possible that, a unit about travel where they've learned, it wouldn't give them the feeling that they have traveled somewhere. It's very hard to simulate that. I spent half my life writing course books and trying to make the role plays and the dialogues as naturalistic as possible, as authentic as possible. I think possibly the way to do that is to get the learners more involved and inputting their own material. So if you've done a unit about travel, for example, okay, so where would you like to travel to? Maybe you could do a project or something. The students could bring in some material themselves, or a trip that they've done. That brings a sense of reality to it. I think it's very hard to create activities and tasks which are, everything ends up being semi-authentic, and role plays and so on. I think one way to make it more authentic is for students to introduce their own, student-generated input is the way to do it, I think. That's one answer anyway.
Now moving to the next question. What do you
just sorry to interrupt, but very interesting. A couple of people have said that breakout rooms has improved collaboration in the classroom and seen some improvements there. So that's a positive in terms of social, and they were okay, and they were better behaved. So this is in line with what I'd heard before, that the remote context had helped socially the group. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay, next question. What do you think of multiple intelligence in the classroom?
Okay, I personally am not, I'm not a big fan. I think we all have different, obviously we all have different learning preferences, and we're all intelligent in different ways. But I think it's very difficult for us to just try to second guess what everybody's intelligence is, and whether it's, I think that we have more in common than we do things that separate us. And I think these ideas, sometimes they try to encourage to separate people into different ways of thinking and being intelligent and so on. So I prefer not to label them in that way. I prefer to look for differences. You have to respect students' different learning styles and learning preferences. But I am skeptical about promoting the idea of multiple intelligences. That I think that it's important for students to reflect on how they think and how they evaluate and the strategies they employ, and that's important. But I don't think they should be thinking that they are all very different from each other. I prefer to focus on what we have in common and what we make us different.
Okay, next question from Nilay Dincho. Is there a more time-saving and practical way of using the carousel activity while remote teaching? Actually, there's one more question about the carousel. They wonder about the layout too.
Yeah, I mean, if it was in class, I didn't make that very clear because I was going very fast at the end of that session. But obviously a big piece of paper is the way to do that. A big A3 piece of paper, A3 size piece of paper with triangles, and then getting students to do that around a table is the way to do it in face-to-face classroom. And remotely, I suppose it could be done in breakout rooms where each room has one of the categories. Could be a bit laborious though. I don't know how well it would work. It certainly works very well with a large, in a face-to-face classroom, it works very well with a large A3 piece of paper, and then you turn it around.
And next question, Lekfif Imani. How does motivation affect student learning autonomy?
Say it again, sorry, Dorisa.
How does motivation affect student learning autonomy?
Well, I mean, I think they kind of coexist, the two concepts, and you need to motivate students. So the games or the topics or the different problem-solving things with some of these activities I've been doing today, the whole idea is to get the students motivated and engaged. And once they're motivated, then they will take more responsibility for their own learning. So you have to have the motivation first, and then you are able to do it on your own. I think it can be very challenging if it's the other way around. So the idea of giving students choice, right? I want you to choose one of these 3 games. Which one do you want to do? I'm going to give you 3 projects. Which one do you want to do? That idea, by giving them the choice, you are motivating them because, I have a choice, fantastic. Once they have the choice, they're more motivated, they will become probably more autonomous. So I think it's the motivation comes first, the activities encourage motivation, and then how you do those activities, how you set them up, will then make your learners more autonomous.
Great. Great. I think being conscious of time, we can finish the second session here. I would like to thank you, Ben, for being with us and sharing your expertise on encouraging learner autonomy. I hope all of you enjoyed our second session. Please be with us for our third session, which will be delivered by Ellie Kensington at 5 p.m., which we are in. Most probably she's trying to connect at the moment.
Okay, well, thank you again, and have a great weekend, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you, Dorosan.
Thank you.
Cambridge.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Please do not hesitate to grab your coffees in the meantime.
Ali's here, Dorosan.
Ellie, can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I cannot share my screen while other participant is sharing, it says.
Well, here it's stop, I guess.
Let me try it again. Nope, it says the same thing. I can't share my screen because
it seems
did Ben stop sharing his screen? I don't think so.
Well, it seems like you're still trying to connect.
No, I'm connected.
Yeah, but there's a wording here, connecting to Ellie Kensington. I guess we need to wait.
There you go. Can you see the screen?
We can't actually.
No, really?
No.
But it's okay. It seems it's okay, Dorsa.
Yeah, we can see it right now. It's okay.
Yep. There you go. Oh my God. I see people. Yeah. Yes. We can see. Oh my gosh. Okay. Should we get started or should we wait a little bit? Is it okay if I chit chat a little bit? Hello. Hi.
You can.
I see many happy faces. Hi there. Okay. Before we start, I'm just going to give some time because, okay. Wow. The message is flowing. Fantastic. All right. Before we start, come again, please.
Let's give them a minute at least because, you know.
Sure, no problem. I'm just going to chit chat. That's all. Hello from Malaya. Oh, fantastic. Hello from Russia. Wow, that's great. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I received so many nice messages. Okay, hi from Spain. Hi, Spain. Okay. Okay, quick question. Have you ever joined my session before? If it's yes, put a yes. And if it's no, Kismet, today is your day. Yes. Okay, yes. Oh, wow, no. Okay, yes, of course, yes. Oh, wow, I got lots of yes. Don't worry about it. If it's a no, no problem. As I said, it's Kismet and today, it's your day. Okay. Oh, wow, okay. Oh, lovely. I get so many nice messages. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet your friend too. I mean, you guys as well. Even if it's virtually, it's totally okay. It's Kismet, exactly. Okay. Cool. Oh, wow. There's so many people. Fantastic. Nice to meet you all. Okay. Should we wait like 5 minutes or how many more minutes should we wait, Dorsa?
Actually, we can start, I guess, being conscious of time.
Okay. So everyone, hello again. It's great to be with you all. And I bet you're wondering, what are we going to talk about? Let me give you a little brief about what we're going to talk about today. Okay, how to assess and integrate Oracy skills. Before we start, by the way, hi, I see hi and hello still coming in. Fantastic. I mean, I'm really thrilled to see so many people. Even though I cannot see you, hopefully one day we will get together and we will do more face-to-face sessions. Okay, let me give a short brief about today's session. All right, we're going to be talking about Oracy briefly. I know for a long time I've been talking about Oracy, and we were talking about how to use Oracy, how to learn about Oracy and everything. But today, as I said, I'm just going to give a short brief, and then after that, we're going to be talking about how to integrate it into the lesson and to real life. And of course, as the last part, we're going to talk about how to assess it. Now, before I go into talking a lot, let's say, let's take a look at our first slide. I know that you already know what is Oracy because we have done a lot of sessions on Oracy. But I would like to repeat the lovely explanation from Neil Worcester from Cambridge University about Oracy. Oracy is the ability to use spoken language effectively. Now, I know that you already internalized this, spoken language effectively. And we're going to go into the depths of it. But as I said before, we're going to just have a little recap about what is Oracy. Now, talking about now, but before we really go into depths of anything, yeah, fantastic guys, amazing. I just looked at the chat box and I see lots of nice comments as well. Exactly, Cambridge Oracy books, and we have CPP Cambridge Primary Path, which I'm going to be also giving some examples from the books as well. Okay, now stay tuned because once in a while I'm going to be asking you some questions. And I want you to hit the chat box and write your response. It's not going to be heavy questions. Don't worry about it. But I want to see what you think about things. All right. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So please take your pens and pencils. And if you have any questions, write them down. At the end, I'm going to take all your questions. Okay. Now, I'm sharing a lovely quote with you. As you can see, children use talk to think and learn, which is so true. I mean, think about our lessons. They do talk and they learn from each other, from us. And the more they think, as Ben was talking, they learn more. And talking is a great tool. And looking, which is leading us to the core of Oracy, learning to talk and learning through talk. Think about the things that you learned through talk. It wasn't only from the teacher's lectures, just by talking to your peers or your friends or your colleagues. Think about it. And how did you do that? Now, again, as I said, before we jump into anything, what I always say, this is my quote, Oracy is a skill for life. When we started beginning this journey with Oracy, unfortunately, before we could do a lot of face-to-face lessons, this COVID period hit us. And there was this urban legend, which was saying that Oracy could not be done virtually with, online lessons. This year, I had the chance to do a lot of lesson observations. And you know what I figured out? It can be done. It can be done. And I mean, for those teachers who are doing it, I mean, very good, give a pat on the shoulder, because throughout my observations, I've seen teachers being very effective, very eligible of doing Oracy even online. It didn't impede anything. So there is another thing that I hear amongst teachers that I wasn't very happy with. Today, that's the reason I picked this subject. Teachers were saying, Oracy is a lesson. No, guys, Oracy is not just a lesson. Oracy is such an extended, such a vast thing that Oracy skills can be transferable to any language your students speak and you speak. It can be German, it can be English, it can be Turkish, it doesn't matter. The language, because you remember what Neil Mercer said? Using spoken language effectively. He didn't say English only. He didn't say this or that language. It's spoken language. Second thing that I want to share with you is considering the importance of being an effective communicator, not only for presenting or discussing, but also for daily life. What are we doing over here in the lessons is we're actually showing them the basis, the things that they will be using in their daily life. But if we don't recycle enough, if we don't go in the depths, and if we don't make it as a classroom language, it's just going to stay as a lesson. And the last thing which I want to say about Oracy as a life skill, you need to focus on the skills you want to develop. Okay, it should not be like, okay, next unit, no. Milk it. If you're talking about a single Oracy skill, milk it, invest, bank in it. Don't just skip the chapter. Okay, we finished it, let's move on. No, use it. And you need to work on them constantly and systematically for your students to internalize it. And don't just say, okay, that lesson is finished and let's move on with something new. No, use it. Carry it into your lessons in every single opportunity. That is one of the most important things that we need to bear in mind. Okay, I'm talking too much, I know. But let's take a look at the focal points. Let's say one of the vital things about Oracy. Ground rules and Oracy framework. As I said, I'm going to just talk shortly about it. Just let's first take a look at the ground rules. Before we start, I just want to take a look at the poster and repeat it with you guys. Everyone should be invited to speak. Nice. Before, again, I go into the poster, lately throughout my studies about Oracy, you know what I figured out? That Oracy is actually totally built on respect. Respect. In every ground rule you see, everything we do, it's the respect that we show to the others, to ourselves, to others' well-being, ideas and everything. Now, everyone should be invited to speak. Yes, I respect you. Come on, I respect your ideas. Come on, let me hear your ideas. Everyone should listen carefully. Of course, think about it. If you're talking and somebody's not listening to you, is that respectful? No. We will ask for and give reasons. We can agree or disagree, which is totally normal. Everyone respects what is said in the group. Yes, again, you see, everything is built on respect. We will share what we know. I respect you and I want to share what I know. And we will make a group decision after talking. That's one of the problems that we're facing, even when students debate or we're debating or we're talking about things. That is one of the biggest problems, to come to a consensus. And if we can do it, again, that shows respect. Why do we have ground rules? Well, we have classroom rules, don't we? Yes, we do. And think about it. If we didn't have them, what could, our classes turn into? I think it would be a little chaotic. So ground rules are there, like classroom rules, to create routines. Routines. Now, I'm just going to underline that a couple of more times, routines. Ground rules create crystal clear process on each Oracy activity. Now, another thing, for students to make sense of these rules and to apply them, they have to understand the reasons behind them. Like the classroom rules, you tell them to raise their hands before they speak, right? And they understand the reason. And what we do is we also have mini posters behind our wall or in the classroom. And what do? If they don't remember, we just like, take a look at that. Do it, come on, kiddo. We do that. Or çocuğum, come on, take a look at the poster. You need to raise your hand before you talk. So they have to understand and they have to repeat. Okay, how are we going to make them understand the reasons behind the ground rules? There are two strategies that I always apply: role-playing and asking the right questions. I remember when we started on this journey in Turkey with Oracy, we did demo lessons, we did lesson and we're still doing lesson observations on Oracy. We haven't, neglected any teacher. We haven't stopped following our program. But the most important thing I was doing was, and I know the teachers are doing, role-playing and asking the right questions. Why do we say role-playing? By using role-playing, ground rules to show what happens when there aren't ground rules. As we said, raising your hand. And think about it, there's a conversation in the classroom and one of the students is doing, no, I don't like your idea. Would you like to have a hand in your face? Would you like to? I mean, honestly, I wouldn't like to interact with someone who's showing me the hand. I would be like, oh, you don't respect me. You're giving me the hand. So I don't want to interact with you anymore. And ask your students, if this happened, how would they feel? What do they think? Now, what I always say is, when you combine feelings with teaching, it becomes a very powerful tool. So when you're doing this role play and when you merge it with emotions, with the feelings, it becomes more meaningful. And at last, what I'm going to be saying about ground rules, start the lesson with every lesson. Guys, every single lesson with memorizing and repeating the ground rules. It's like the classroom rules. If there are no ground rules, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So repeat it so students can internalize. And please, all times when you're doing an Oracy lesson or another lesson, doesn't matter, have your ground rule poster over there and start the lesson with, let's remember the ground rules until it is internalized. They know it by heart. As we were talking about the second focal point of Oracy, it's the framework. Now, what we're going to be seeing in the slide is kind of a summary, the brief of the skills. We know that we have 3 skills: physical skills, we have cognitive skills, and we have social emotional skills. Let's take a look at it. As I said, this part is just to refresh our memory. Okay, under the physical skills, we have some sub skills like appropriate body movement, projecting your voice, making eye contact. As I said, it's fast, but I'm just minimizing. You can do, oh my God, I lost it. Okay, tonal variation and a lot more. Let's take a look at cognitive skills. Agreeing and disagreeing with the opinions of others, asking questions, structuring talk, reasoning, and there's so many others. And when we come to social emotional skills, listening actively, respecting the opinions of others, eliciting contribution from others, participating in group discussions. All of these are in social emotions. As I said, that's just a little recap. As a summary, what I can say is presentations, collaboration, or discussions. I know that the ones who have attended my Oracy sessions, what I always say about presentation is not having a project and going in front of a crowd and just presenting it. No, as teachers, when we start talking about something, it's a presentation. 2 people transmitting the message to each other, it's presentation. So it's not always a piece of paper or a PowerPoint and presenting it. No, everything around transmitting your message to the others, to the third party, is a presentation. We have collaboration. It's not always 2 students or group of students coming together and doing an activity. No, you can collaborate in different ways. Like if you're cooking something together with a person, with your mom, with your friend, with your husband, with your wife, it doesn't matter. That's collaboration, doing something together, sharing it. And I bet there is a conversation going when you're doing that activity as well. And of course, discussion. Whatever you talk about anything is a discussion. Okay, so this was kind of the summary of Oracy. As I said, it's a brief, like kind of a compact version. Okay, now, this is the quote that I got from Cambridge White Paper. Children's talk during whole class sessions or during group activities can be used to assess not only their spoken language skills, but also their learning and curriculum subjects. Curriculum subjects and oracy. That's a nice thing. You know what I hear in some of my sessions with teachers? I had an oracy lesson and I have an English lesson. Now, that was the reason, as I said, I brought this topic. Actually, they're so integrated. We just need to know how to bring oracy to our curriculum subjects. I'm just going to take a look at the chat box. I see a lot of things going on. Okay, essential rules, fantastic. Okay, do you want me to speak a little bit louder? Okay, language, okay. Okay, fantastic. You guys are amazing. Okay, so I'll speak a little louder. I'll do my best, no worries. Okay, so we were talking about curriculum subject. Let's take a look. How are we going to carry the oracy skills that we learn into the curriculum subjects? Now, oops, yes. Now, I know most of you know Kids Box, and this is from grade 1, book 1, and there's a nice activity over here. Sing the song and ask and answer. Okay, let's take a look at it. So we have the student asking, is Monty under the chair? And the second student is saying, no, he isn't. And as you can see, there's a big picture over here and lots of question marks. But you know what I want to do? I want to really bring oracy into the classroom. And you know how I'm going to do that? I'm going to add student C into this group. Now this question, get ready guys. This question comes to you and hit the chat box. What kind of language would you need to invite someone into a discussion? How would you invite someone into a discussion? Now, what do you think? Fantastic. What is your idea? Guys, there's no right or wrong answer. Bring it. Do you agree? Amazing. What about you? X, fantastic. Is he under the bed? What's your opinion? Asking for opinions. What's your idea? What is your idea? Fantastic. Have you ever thought about open questions? Why don't you join us? Amazing. Can you see Monty? I always have difficulty saying that name. I care about your, I love that one. I care about your ideas. Now we're gonna we have a slide about that. I care about your ideas. We talked about the natural diseases, talk about the emergency back. Okay, okay. You're just gonna invite them. Do you want to say something about this? Asking questions, share your opinion. Guys, you're absolutely amazing. How about you? Fabulous. Okay, now join us. Exactly. What about joining us? Why not? Can you see him? Where are you? Monty sign on this. Okay, now I know there isn't any Monty sign over there. Okay, okay. Now, what I would do is I took this from Cambridge Voices. There was a lesson from book 1 and I merged it with Kids Box. Now, student A asks the question, is Monty under the chair? By the way, thank you very much for your answers. I love them. I love them. Student B says, no, he isn't. And student B asks, do you agree to student C? And student C says, yes, or yes, I do. And as you can see, this is the same thing that has been done in the book and Cambridge Voices. So you see how we're bringing these two things together easily. And what happens is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 question marks. That means there's going to be, B is going to be asking, is Monty under the chair? And C is going to say, no, he isn't, or yes, he is. And again, C is going to ask A, do you agree? So it's going to be a perfect rotation. What we're doing over here is we're internalizing the language. We're carrying oracy skills out of the classroom. As the bottom line, we have our check your oracy part. Students are going to do some self-assessment and they're going to be asking, I participated? Yes, I did, because it's a 3-way conversation. It's inevitable. You can't run from it. Of course, they're going to be participating. I agreed and I disagreed. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I listened to my classmates, again, inevitable, because it's, as I said, it's a three-way conversation. The conversation cannot go on if they don't listen to each other. See how easy it is actually. If you have an Oracy lesson, use it. And I remember giving this example. I didn't put it on the slides, but when you walk into the class, or if you're doing a virtual lesson, I bet you start with some routines, like what's the weather like today? What's the date? What's the day? And stuff like that. Ask the question, what's the weather like today? Even you're doing virtually. Ahmed, what's the date? What's the weather like today? And Ahmed says, it's cloudy. And ask the rest of the group, your class, do you agree? So this is a more smooth progression, bringing the language, bringing the skills into your classroom easily. Let's take a look at another example. Okay, active listening. I know that you know that I'm crazy about this subject. Active listening. We're gonna go step by step. Now, step one, act out like someone who is not actively listening. So we got someone talking over here. I don't know if you can see me. Let me see if you can see my hand. Wait a second. Yeah, somebody's talking to you and you're like, am I actively listening? No. I bet you're saying you're missing out the eye contact, you're not paying attention, you're not echoing, you're not asking any questions, which is true because I'm not actively listening. I'm just like, yeah, you talk, and the person goes like, sad. But of course, we need to ask this person, how do they feel? How do you feel? I feel bad, of course, because I'm not listening to you actively. I'm not respecting you. Okay, let's jump into step two. Now, this is nice. Now, again, you're going to be hitting the chat box. Asking for repetition when you don't understand something that someone says. What kind of a thing would you say if somebody says something and you don't understand? Okay, chat box time. Okay, sorry. Say that again. Excuse me. Can you repeat that? Come again, please. Exactly. Sorry, I see. Sorry. Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? Sorry, I'm sorry. Pardon me. Can you repeat it? Come again. Again, please. I'm sorry. Further. Can you repeat that? I think it's always okay. Can you say that again? I can't. Okay, I could not follow. Again, please. I missed it. Exactly, guys. You're amazing. You're amazing. Pardon me. I couldn't understand that. You said, I lost. Okay, I lost you because I lost you. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I missed it and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fantastic. What was that? What do you mean by that? Okay, fabulous, fabulous. And it depends on the students you're teaching as well. Let's not forget. Okay, I didn't catch that. I'm a bit lost. Guys, you're amazing. You're absolutely amazing. I beg your pardon. Oh, yeah, I beg your pardon. Could you repeat that, please? Okay, couldn't catch up on that. I couldn't catch it. Okay, fantastic. So we're all on the same line, right? Now, okay. Again, I'm going to share one of my experiences with you. I remember, I'm also an assessor. And I remember when I was examining, when I asked something, generally kids' answer was, okay, I'm sure, what? And you're like, you don't like it, of course, but you're an examiner. You need to proceed with the procedure. So you don't say, kid, put on your attitude. No, you don't say that. You just go with the flow. But of course, we don't want that word, what? You can say, what did you say? What was you talking about? It's okay, but what? Generally, what? I don't really like that thing. And I don't think that you would like the same. I mean, you would like to be responding the same way. What? No. All right, so we're going to be replacing this. We're going to be replacing this. And we're going to be replacing this with, please repeat that. This is, I got this, the cue card from Cambridge Primary Path. So what we can do over here is, if it's difficult for your students to say, you can come up with something different. Could you repeat that, please? Come again, please. Please repeat that. But now there is a little but over there. Step 2, hang that keyword, the cue card, on the wall. It can be your classroom, or if you're doing a virtual lesson, on the wall that you're backing. So repeat that, or could you repeat that? It depends on what language is going to be easy for your students. Okay, I was telling you about my experience with, again, examining. One day, what happened was a little sad. I felt a little sad for the kid. I was asking my question with a normal tone and a normal face, and the student said, she couldn't understand, said, repeat after me. Of course, in a normal situation, if I was with my friends, I would be saying, repeat after me. But of course, that's an exam, so I have to be very respectful. So I repeated my question. So you don't want your students to end up in a situation like that, do you? Repeat after me. So instead, let's implement the language into our classroom so they will not have these kind of situations. So how are we going to do it? Let's take a little look. Hang the repeat that, or could you repeat that, on the wall. As a teacher, repeat. Please repeat that in every situation. If you don't understand something, but you have to stick with the language. If you don't understand something, you say, please repeat that. I couldn't understand. Please repeat that. You have to use this language, because in Oracy, we know one thing. You are a model. Your students are a model. And you are, let's say, influencing each other. Okay, and third, if your students can't understand what you or their friends say, just point at the cue card and say, what do we say? Please repeat that. Fantastic. There you go. And it's a smooth progression. It's a smooth implementation into the classroom. So what we studied in Oracy lesson is not staying in Oracy lesson. Let's take a look at another example. Now, this is my favorite. Why? Because this is an assessment tool. You create a poster. And generally, we ask our students to create posters and mini projects, project work, I'm not saying project-based learning, mini project, at the end of the lesson to assess their learning. Informal way, but I think it's the most tasteful way because they don't feel like they're being assessed. So we give them projects. Okay. We give them, mini projects, and they create posters, this and that. Over here, there's a lovely topic. Make a travel poster. Where would you like to go? Now, let me show you what happens. As I always say, Oracy is not only based on one skill. There are 3 skills make Oracy: physical, cognitive, social, emotional. So what we have to do is we have to bring everything together. It's not only the language, it's also the physical and social emotional skills, which makes Oracy. If the student is really good with the physical and not good with the cognitive, I don't think that's Oracy. That's a good skill, but not Oracy. So let's take a look at this. Normally students come up, again from my experience, students come up and they start presenting their poster. I'm sorry, I couldn't draw anything about it, but just like visualize. All right. Where would you like to go? I would like to go to the seaside and the mountains and to see my grandmother and the amusement park. What was lacking over here? I bet you're all saying, discourse markers, discourse markers. Again, from my experience as an assessor, that was a thing that I came across with a lot. Lack of discourse markers. Not only discourse markers, also the interaction. Now, this is from Cambridge Primary Path. I got this this piece of knowledge from Cambridge Primary Path, the Oracy part. Okay, speaking in front of an audience. Okay, what do we need to do? We need to show, even though your body language is good, you're looking straight into your audience and everything, but you're not interacting. You're not actually speaking to your audience. You're just speaking to yourself. But you need to add elements like, this is my poster. Everyone, please look at this. first, I would like to go to the seaside next to the mountains. Then I would like to visit my grandmother. And finally, I would like to go to an amusement park. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference between, I mean, I didn't add anything extra. There is a difference between how we present it, how we use the language. This is a very social, emotional, and physical skill coming together. Now, we know one thing, that Oracy is what I call is a pancake system. It's building on cumulative system. This example was from Global English 2. Let me show you an example from Global English 4. And of course, this was from Cambridge Primary Path 2. And the example I'm going to be showing you is going to be from Cambridge Primary Path 4. Now, there is a difference. Have you noticed speaking in front of an audience, interacting with the audience? There's a big difference. It's obvious that the student is apprentice level and this student is developing level, let's say. And look at the difference now. Even the student is shy. If that student uses the language, is everyone ready? Can everyone hear me? Do you have any questions? And of course, taking some, let's say, vocabulary information over here and carried. First of all, also, next, then, finally. How would that sound? How would that presentation sound? I believe it would be sounding really rich and fulfilling. So again, what we're doing is we're merging, we're integrating Oracy skills into our daily lessons and with ease. So I didn't close the book and I didn't say, okay, the chapter is over, bye-bye. What I'm doing, I'm bringing it into the lesson. All right, let's take a look at another one. Before doing that, I like to use this wording. Use Oracy in every single opportunity that you can use. Now you're going to be saying, okay, we talked about English. What about science? There's a science lesson, and this is from Cambridge Primary Science. And it's obviously talking about a healthy diet, giving information about science. All right. And I took the next activity, and it's about tasting fruit and vegetables. Now, this question comes to you, everyone. Talk about the taste of some fruit and vegetables. Which ones will you like? Make a prediction, then taste them. Draw a table like this for your results. Now, I want you to hit the chat box and give me some wording. What kind of wording would you use to discuss and talk about these things, this activity? Chat box, please. Okie dokie. To make them think, exactly, but use the language. Give me something. What would you, how would the students interact? What kind of language would they use? It tasted, okay. Why not? There's no right or wrong answers until the real answer is revealed. Okay, tasty, yummy, delicious. But how would they interact? The interaction language. What kind of language would they use? Oh, good. Imagining you are eating. Okay, I have ever. Okay, wow, yuck. Okay, finally, I like it. Do you? Curiosity language. What do you think? Wow. Okay. Umami. That's interesting. Okay, reactions. Nice. Guess how it tasted. Okay, you can. Okay, can you share? Yum. Got them. Okay. Different kinds of tastes. Okay, now let me show you what I would do. So it's more like a lost conversation, isn't it? So why don't we structure this conversation? And I would say for ground rule discussions, that's important. If they're writing the table, if they're doing something about the table, that's important. That's nice that you put it over there. Or giving positive feedback. Great job. Look at that table. That looks awesome. and giving opinion. I think melon might taste sweet. I'm just making up. I know how does it taste. I agree with you. I disagree with you. The last summer, the melon I ate was not that sweet. You see what I mean? And what happens? You're structuring the conversation, even if it's science. It doesn't matter. You can talk about centipedes and millipedes, and you can say, you know what, centipedes are smaller than millipedes. And I agree with you. No, I don't agree with it. Or you can even talk about spores. You know, how do herbals or like, let's say, flowers germinate? It's easy. It's all about how you're going to carry this into your class. I'm preparing this session on how to use Oracy on math and science. Hopefully soon we'll be talking about that as well. But that's just a simple example. You can easily bring Oracy skills into your classes and make it more fruitful. It's going to bring a good quality because we're talking about spoken language effectively. It's going to bring a beautiful structure. It's going to make it more meaningful for students, and they will be seeing the structure all the time. So the more they repeat, the more they will internalize. Okay, before I give you a headache, I just need to jump into the juicy, nice part as well, which is assessing, because we're going to be assessing students with fun and engaging activities. How are we going to do that? Before we jump into that, let me give you another quote from Cambridge White Papers. Oracy can be assessed in order to make rapid decisions about what a child or children need to learn next. True. Now, actually, that's a nice part, because if they haven't learned it, that means we need to do a correction action and reteach what we have taught them, because they haven't learned it. To report to parents, colleagues, or other professionals, or it can be self-assessed, so that children can identify aspects of their own development and consider their progression. Now, as an assessor, I always say, assessment can be carried out formally or informally, formative or summative, it doesn't matter, but it has to be there. And one of the most important things, self-assessment, be true to yourself. How are we going to do that? Let me show you. Now, our first thing is from Oracy again, from presentation skills, using appropriate body movement. What are we talking about now? Let me show you. When we give presentations, we stand up straight and keep still. So you don't want someone to, present something like that, would you? No. We look out at our audience as much as possible when talking. So you don't want someone to be like this. Okay. So you teach this in the classroom. How will you know your students really grasped it? So this is a nice example. Bad Oracy. Get your students to record themselves using bad Oracy and good Oracy. So that means when we're talking about bad Oracy, even the, let's say, social, emotional, and cognitive skills are there. If the student is talking, hello everyone, can you all hear me? Today we're going to be talking about my presentation, and would you like to listen to someone like this? Even the language is there. The cognitive and social emotional skills are there. The student is asking if you can hear them. Okay, body language. No, exactly. I wouldn't like, that's not Oracy, because the physical skill is missing. And in the second video, the student has to perform a good Oracy, meaning, hello everyone. Can you all hear me? Fantastic. This is my presentation. First of all, I would like to talk about, there you go. So they have to show you bad Oracy and good Oracy. This way, you can clearly understand if your students understand or they have internalized it or not. Okay, variation. What other ways can we do this activity? This activity can be applied to discussions. 2 or 3 students performing bad and good Oracy examples. What do you think are the benefits? Actually, I gave you out some of them, but now this question goes to you. Why? Okay. What do you think? What are the benefits? Goodbye, Fahrettin. It's okay. I totally respect that. No worries. Okay. What are the benefits? Good oracy, you get your students to record their bad and good oracy skills. Why do we do this? Self-esteem, fantastic. What else? When students said, I'm a minor, excused, okay. So that can assess, they assess self-assessment, they compare exactly experience, very good, stimulates the students and catch their mistakes exactly. And yes, demonstrating by role-playing, better understanding, see differences to realize the self-respect. Very good, guys, you're amazing. I can definitely say that. Awareness, very good. Use English as much as they can. Of course, the oracy skills as well, Jenna. All right, holding the mirror. Okay, holding the mirrors. That's good. It's like seeing your reflection, modeling. You guys are amazing. Absolutely amazing. Very good. So let's take a look at my list. I said this activity helps students to distinguish the difference between good and bad oracy. So we want them to stick with good oracy, but if they cannot show me what is bad oracy, how will they know it's a good oracy or bad oracy? And raises awareness and self and peer assessment. So those who wrote in the chat box, give yourself a pat on the shoulder. Okay, moving on. Listening actively and participating in a discussion. This activity is based on collaboration and discussion. For those who are preparing your students for debates, I think you will very much like this. Now, let's take a look at it. Step 1, 2 or 3 students agree on a topic, but of course they will not tell the rest of the group. It's just like 3 students or 2 students coming together. They discuss, they find a topic, but they will not share it with the rest of the group. Step 2. Students, the rest of the students, these 3 students start discussing the topic. And they're going to be loud so everybody can hear. The others listen and listen actively. Anyone in the rest of the group who thinks she or he knows the topic joins into the conversation, joins into the discussion. When about a third or half of the class have joined in, activity stops. So think about it. There's a group of students with a secret topic. They're talking and the rest is listening actively. I think that is a great way of doing active listening and participating in a discussion. And it is a fun activity. Let's take a look at the variation of this. Students who think they know the secret topic, they write a mini note. They can do it virtually, send a private message to the teacher, or on a piece of paper, give it to the teacher. And the ones who get an approval, they're accepted. If if they don't know the topic, they will sit, they go back and they wait until they can really grasp. Think about it, how fun this is. There is a conversation going on, you're trying to catch, what is it? And you want to join in. And why don't you turn it into a competition? 2 teams do the same thing, and rewards are points, they're like reward system. So according to the number of students who find out the secret topic and contribute will be the winners. The most, the numbers, which group has the biggest number will be the winner. This is full contribution. This is good for debates. This is good for participating. This is good for active listening. And you can integrate it and you can assess who's listening actively, who's participating. You can also assess your students easily. And of course, project. I call it Oracy of the Month. Make an Oracy poster with your favorite skill of the month and present it to your class. I mean, this was the design I made, but your students don't have to stick with this. They have to write mini conversations over here. They have to come up with a question and they have to write some information. This way, your students, while they're presenting, they learn it or they refresh their memory. Also, the rest of the group will benefit this. And let me show you a variation of this. Assign an Oracy skill to each student or mini groups for them to present it. Get the rest of the class to prepare questions to the presenter and for each other. So you see, it's like a three-way activity. It's not only the presenter, but also the spectators are going to be prepared, and to also each other. Okay, and the last one. I think this is my soft spot. When I was writing this one, I got a little emotional because giving a pat on the shoulder is also always a thing for me. Internal constructive pat on the shoulder system. Instead of penalizing, instead of neglecting someone, encourage them. Why do I say that? Because Oracy is the skill to communicate effectively with each other, but not only to deliver a presentation or discuss things. It is also to give the right verbal support. It's not just like, okay, let's do a presentation, let's do a discussion, hooray. No, there's also verbal support. And how do we do that? When students can't, like we have a discussion group, we have 3 students and they cannot participate, they feel shy, or let's say they feel discouraged. The next student turns to them and says, come on, let's remember the ground rules or the Oracy rule. You can do it. Let's try again. So this is creating actually a mini community in the classroom, which is supporting each other. It's like, come on, my friend, you can do it. It's a pat on the shoulder system. And let's take a look at the variation. Create a list of constructive language and hang it on the wall, your classroom wall or the wall that you're presenting, most of the time you have it behind you. Okay, how to implement? While monitoring, direct your students to the list. Get your students to do the same with each other. So it's not only you doing it, let them do it. Because once you start doing it, pointing out and say, come on, do it to each other, they're going to internalize. What I'm always saying is, don't leave it. Don't leave Oracy in the lesson. You can easily bring it to life and you can use it every single day and you can benefit. And what are the benefits? Easily collaboration. We're talking about collaboration. Ben was talking about collaboration and Herbert was talking partially about collaboration. We're all talking about collaboration. At the end of the day, we want our students to work together. We want them to listen to each other. We want them to share ideas. And how are we going to do that? If the student is silent, is sitting over there like a shy little kitten, what you going to do? Okay, well, that student is introvert. That student is shy. Nothing to do about it. Bye. You can't do that. You need to find ways to pull them in. And the best way is a friend saying, come on, my friend, you can do it. Another benefit, increases awareness. Okay, is children discussing ideas with each other and coming up with their own conclusions. That was the second, but like the third part was built on. They were talking, they were discussing, and they were coming up to the conclusions. Talk supports thinking, talk supports thinking, and that means it supports learning. Teaching Oracy means putting more intention behind how you guide and organize your students' talk. So let's do this together. And for further references, there you go. You can take a picture, or if you want it, we can send it to you as well. And any questions? I hope you didn't get bored to death, by the way. Thanks. Any questions? Was that clear? Not at all. Okay, that means that you guys are tired. No, it was perfect. Oh, thank you so much, guys. Please, 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 if you have any questions, please, I'm always here. Oh, thank you. Possible to change the discussion. You can do, okay. If you have any questions, please just write it in the Q&A. Is it the Q&A part, Dorsa?
Yep.
Okay, please write in the Q&A part. I would love to, I would be delighted to answer your questions. Oh, thank you guys, you're amazing. Thank you. You're gonna make me cry now. I'm getting emotional. Okay, let's take a look at the Q&A. You guys are amazing. Okay, what are the benefits of asking for feedback and its importance on Oracy? Well, It depends on the topic. Now, number one, how are you going to ask that feedback? Maybe, how do you feel about it? Or can you use it in the class? What kind of situations can you use it? These kind of things. Let them go and try, or let them try it in the classroom and then give you a feedback. That's nice. And of course it is important. Aslan Canım, it's always important to get students' ideas and feedback. It is. So please do that. Can you send us sample lessons including Oracy? Of course we can do that, surely, but it depends. What kind of merging do you want? What kind of lessons do you want? Be more specific. I'm gonna give you my email address. Of course we can share it. It's an open source. We wanna share Oracy with everyone. We want all our students and the people around us to be great communicators. Of course I will be helping. How can we encourage students to speak more outside the classroom environment? Now, Yaren, dear, I know it's a crucial time. I know, please write, if you have any questions, please write in the question and answer part. I'm answering all your questions. Now, how will we do it? At the moment, I'm gonna be really honest with you. I'm gonna talk about my solutions. It's COVID period. Students cannot, let's say, socialize with each other. So you can give them mini tasks. Like, do you remember bad Oracy, good Oracy? Or you can ask them to video mini things for you, to present things. You say, okay, you know what I want? I'm going to be doing something nice for you. Pick a subject that you like. Anything. It can be fashion, it can be football, it can be this, games, whatever, and present it. Make them feel comfortable. You see, make them feel comfortable about the language. The more they talk about topics they're comfortable with, the more they're going to be producing things. In conclusion, Oracy is the core of language learning. Well, let's say, as a conclusion, we can say Oracy is the core of expressing yourself in a strong way. Because sometimes people are going, shy, they can't express themselves, but we need to build this. We need to build this skill day by day, and we can do that. Okay, for high school, gentlemen, you can easily implement this into high school. Now we have, let me show you this. We have 4 stages of the framework. You can easily focus on the confident part. Of course, you need to start building bases. Like, as we mentioned, the ground rules, you need to get them to internalize it and then start building. Pick a skill and work on it and work on it and work on it. For everything, for debates, for high school, even for university and business people, look at the way they're talking. Confidence. So do it, implement it day by day. And once you implement it, don't just finish it and move on, go on. Do you have a book? Well, that's an open-ended question. Do I have a book, or is there a book on Oracy? Let's rephrase that one, if possible, please. If I have a book, no, soon I will be releasing one. If there is a book on Oracy, there's so many materials on Oracy. Okay, how to motivate students to switch on the camera online. Ah, canım benim yani. I so understand that problem. I even have it when I'm doing a session with teachers sometimes. But this is the thing. Let's be honest with each other. You cannot force someone if they don't want to. Now, Hasbella, right? I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Okay, what I'm saying over here is, if you want to really motivate your students, bring something fun into the classroom. Bring something fun into the classroom that they want to contribute. They want to say, hey, Hocam, I want to answer as well. Number 1. Number 2, you know that we have silent period in education. When the students in silent period, whatever you do, you cannot crack it until they're ready to be opened. So 2 strategies: be patient or bring something really fun into the classroom and say, motivated. I'm sorry, I'm gonna be a horrible person, but Ivan Pavlov made it. Do you want some more fun? I wanna see the cameras on. There you go. But bring something fun, touching their, heart. Do you have a book about Oracy in mind to recommend? That's a nice one. Please do start reading the white paper. I shared the link. I'm going to go back and I'm going to share the link again. Oops, Daisy. The first one, please start with reading part of, this is the one I'm talking about, part of the Cambridge paper in ELT series, develop of Oracy skills in school and age learners. First step first, start reading the white paper. Okay, and then if you want more, I'll give you my email address. Guys, don't forget, this is my email address. If you need to ask me any questions, I'm going to close the session and I'm going to continue answering the questions. And I have this new quote: gifted speakers are born and effective speakers are made. So let's make some effective speakers. And if you need anything, the email address is there. And if you want to follow more sessions, that's my Facebook page. Now going back to the questions. All right, do you have, yeah, that was the recommendation. Learning to talk, learning through talk, love this. The more they talk, the more motivated they feel. Don't you think? I totally agree, Sevinch. I totally agree, gentlemen. It is the reality, and they're going to be learning while they're collaborating. They're going to be learning from each other. Thank you so much, Sevinch. You're lovely too, because you have listened and you're giving me what I wanted. Thank you. Okay, let's take a look at Selin. While assessing our students' Oracy skills, how can we assess their sub-skills such as grammar, vocabulary, knowledge? Okay. Moreover, should we correct their mistakes? Prevent fossilization. Okay, nice, Devinch. That's a nice question. Actually, when you are assessing, do you remember the poster activity we were talking about? That's an assessment tool. In that tool, you're already assessing students' vocabulary, knowledge, attitude, and on top of everything, grammar, vocabulary, skills, and presentations, all in one. Choose an assessment tool. Choose an assessment tool that they can reflect everything at the same time. Their Oracy skills and whatever you're asking. It can be grammar and vocabulary, or it can be also something related with the lesson. You see you want to see what they have gained out of the lesson. So choose that and the way your students' differentiation and level. And talking about correcting mistakes, that's my style. I like correcting mistakes, but not right away, because this will discard students. What we can do is give examples. Like, well, in one of my lessons, one of the students did that kind of a mistake. Write it on the board, let them see and say, what kind of things do you think, what is wrong with this? Get them to self-assess, self-correct, and then when it happens again, do the same thing. Oh, you know what? In my previous lesson, there was a mistake like that. Put it on the board, let them see, but never pinpoint the kid who made the mistake. All right. I hope that answered your question, Sidin. Okay, Masha, how can we encourage students who take part in the activities due to lack of self-esteem? Okay, guys, I know some of you are already very tired. Can I ask you something? This is my email address, info@kensingtonalley.com. Please, 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 please send me your questions and I'll get back to you with any question you're asking. I'm here. I would be delighted. I'm terribly sorry, but I need to finish this session. There is a red light saying, Ali, finish the session. People are starting to have headache. All right. Yes. So please send me an email. That's my email address and I will be there for you. Thank you all. I'm looking at the chat box and I love it.
Great.
Guys, you're amazing. Thank you
for this great session.
Thank you so much, Dorsal, for hosting as well, and Honor as well. Guys, you're amazing. Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you again. We came to an end of our Cambridge Days event. It was a great honor to welcome our international speakers alongside with you. Many thanks to our speakers Herbert Puhta, Ben Goldstein, and Ella Kensington. It was great to have you all with us today. And dear teachers, thank you for attending our Cambridge Days event. We hope that you took many ideas with you from our sessions today. We would love to hear your feedback to help us shape our future events. The certificate of attendance link, video links, and the PPTs will be sent over to you through an email. Once again, thank you very much for being with us today. Have a great academic term. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.